Jæja, eins og ég sagði, þá erum við hérna að taka á móti mögnuðum gest og hann heitir David Icke og kemur frá Breitlandi, and I will switch over to English now for the sake of our guest.
Oh, I understand you now.
Welcome, David.
Thank you.
As it says here on Wikipedia, David...
Oh, you must go to Wikipedia, it's never wrong.
David Von Icke is an English writer and public speaker, a former footballer and sports broadcaster. Icke has made his name since the 1990s as a professional conspiracy theorist, calling himself a full-time investigator into who and what is really controlling the world. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than that, but that'll do. And by the way, you know, it's kind of interesting that they use this term conspiracy theorist or conspiracy theory whenever you are challenging the official version of events.
Do you believe it's condescending?
No, the interesting thing is where it came from. All these decades later, 50 years later, the media are still saying conspiracy theorists for anyone who is challenging the official version of events. And where that term came into widespread use was from the CIA in the 1960s. They were wanting to discredit people who were questioning the ludicrous official story of the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
And the documents exist. They contacted media organizations in America and said, use the term conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorists to undermine these people. And it's still being used all these years later. It's extraordinary.
But I mean, these theories, they are quite controversial, your theories.
I hope so. If you're challenging the normal, they have to be controversial, don't they?
In your book, The Biggest Secret, you write about this global conspiracy, a hidden hand manipulating humanity's destiny through the shadows, using those who seem to be in power. You've spoken about the people in power as being, what, reptilians?
Well, that's a very broad stroke, and the reason I talk for 10 hours in Reykjavik on Sunday is there is a phenomenal number of dots to connect. Because if I talk about the world as it is to you, there's a massive gimme, which is all the world that everyone perceives it to be. When where I'm coming from is completely rewriting reality as we perceive it, and thus there's a big backstory. But let's look at this hidden hand on just this level. If you look in almost every country, there is usually one or two parties, sometimes three, that have any chance of forming a government. So you vote for Party A, and Party A gets in. You don't like what they do. So then to get rid of them, you vote for Party B. And you don't like what Party B does. So how do you get rid of Party B? You have to go and vote for Party A again. And this is called political choice, and it's called democracy. Now, if you take the American example, during the Bush administration, that government, accepted by the mainstream media in America, was controlled by a group of people called neocons or neoconservatives. These were people from an organization called the Project for the New American Century, involving Cheney, involving...
but how is this
No, let me finish the point, or, or you'll never get to that point. And so they were the force behind the Bush administration. You then had a man come in who no one could ever have claimed to be more about change and being different than Barack Obama. But the Democratic Party is controlled by another group of people, very similar in nature to the neocons of the Republican Party, and I call them the democons. Now, this is the point.
Okay.
If you go one step back into the shadows, the neocons and the democons answer to the same people, the same masters. So therefore, whoever's
who are the masters they answer to?
Whoever's in power in the White House, that organization is always in power, and that's why we went from Bush to Obama, and nothing basically changed.
Yeah, I mean, but that's just politics. That's not a conspiracy, is it?
Well, when you have a situation where a group is controlling whichever side is in power, you are controlling events ongoing. And I say this to people. Don't look at the here today, gone tomorrow politicians. Hold on, who are here and gone. Look at who's always there. If you look, for instance, in the American example and the British example, who's always there? First of all, the intelligence network is always there. The military control system is always there.
Yeah. Why shouldn't it be?
The point is, they don't have to answer to the electorate. They're always there. Across America and other countries, places like Pine Gap in Australia.
Yes, they have to answer to the electorate.
No, they
yes,
do
they
not.
Do.
Don't be. That,
You're connecting between thoughts.
That's unbelievably naive, mate. Listen, I've been investigating this in nearly 60 countries for nearly 30 years.
Okay.
You're coming from a point of view of the mainstream media which sees the world in a certain way.
Okay.
And you see what's in front of your eyes. It's what you can't see that is running this world, not what you can.
Okay.
And I was going to make a point there. Just let me finish or we're going to get nowhere. Across America and places like Pine Gap in Australia, you have underground bases. They're called DUMBs, deep underground military bases. Presidents aren't even allowed to know what goes on there. Their security clearance is not high enough to know what goes on. So who makes those decisions?
And is it a...
No, I asked a question. Who makes those decisions?
I ask you, do you mean that is a race of shape-shifting lizards who occupy the roles of...
What makes those decisions? In terms of the military, is this force that's constantly in power, whoever else is in power. Now
you're shape-shifting lizards.
Hold on, you're going to start bringing in reptilians and shape-shifting reptilians, okay? Yeah. And you're going to start laughing at that from that perspective. Let me ask you this question. You're looking out of your eyes now, right, into this studio. How much of it can you see? How much of what's in the space that you're looking at can you see?
Just about
everything.
180 degrees.
Right. But the space. What exists in the space you're looking at? How much of it can you see?
Where are you going with this?
Well, I'll explain. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in this universe. The human brain, the human eyes, can see a tiny fraction of the 0.005%, which they call visible light. In other words, the almost entirety of what exists you can't see, and I can't see. So here's a question.
What I can't see doesn't mean that it has to be a conspiracy behind it.
Here's a question. What exists in the almost entirety of reality that you can't see?
What exists?
What exists?
I don't know.
You don't know.
No.
So what I see...
It doesn't mean, though, even though I don't know, it doesn't mean that something is supernatural or a conspiracy behind it.
Okay, let me ask you this.
You're making things up as you go.
Well, I have been talking to thousands of people at a time, right across the world, week after week, since June last year. And they've stayed for 10 hours. They are from the great spectrum of society, all colours, all races, all backgrounds. But of course, all they had to do was come to you and ask you how things were, and then they didn't have to turn up, did they?
Okay,
so obviously, they're not crazy, so I must be saying something that makes sense. But the point is, I asked you a question, you're not answering it. Do you think, outside of this great entirety that you can't see, that there could be life that doesn't look human?
Yes.
Right?
Sure,
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, that there are forms of life.
That's not exactly what you're saying. You're saying that presidents, prime ministers and royalties are lizard people. That's what you've been saying.
I'm saying they are hybrid. They're part a non-human race and part a human race, and the part that we see is the human race, and the non-human part operates in this unseen that we can't see.
So they are alien reptiles.
Yes.
And how did you find that out?
Well, if you go and speak and research ancient cultures all over the world, you find that they are talking about the same thing. For instance, the Zulus call them the Chitahuri, the children of the serpent. The Chinese call them the serpent people and the serpent gods. And when you spend decades traveling the world, researching these ancient accounts, and then because you get well known for this information, you then get approached by people on the inside today in places like America and Britain and Europe, who want to get this information out, who are telling you the same story that the ancient accounts are saying. When you then have people, vast numbers of people now around the world, even there are some television channels that put their information out now on these multi-channel networks, who talk about interacting and being abducted by entities that are described in exactly the same way. When you have texts that were found in Egypt in 1945 that were buried around 400 AD, who describe reptilian and grey type entities, which is exactly what the modern UFO research community talk about today.
But you read this between the lines. It's not exactly literally saying reptile people.
Of course, I'm saying they are hybrids, and the point is, you can either sit there and get your information from the mainstream newspapers and the mainstream news channels and mainstream politicians, or you can get off your arse and you can go and research and find out information that you're not going to get from other sources.
And the information
and people who laughed at me 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, they're now coming to the events.
Okay, and the theory is, in short, is that presidents, from presidents to royal families, all trusted public figures, they're secretly part of a reptilian satanist pedophile group. Who've been on this planet for centuries.
Not every one of them, but yes, in theory. And let me tell you this, in 1998, you mentioned a book there, The Biggest Secret.
Yes.
I exposed the then Prime Minister, or not then Prime Minister, but former Prime Minister of Britain, who was still alive, called Edward Heath, as a satanic paedophile. The book passage,
a satanic paedophile.
The book passage was read to him the week of publication. He lived for another 7 years. He did nothing about it. 17 years later, in the wake of the Jimmy Savile paedophile scandal in Britain, a police investigation began into Edward Heath involving paedophilia, and some people are also talking about Satanism, people who were abused by him 17 years ago. And when I put it in that book, people like you laugh, because what you're doing is you're coming from a postage stamp vision of possibility, and everyone who steps outside of it, you have to laugh, because your mind hasn't got the capacity to go there.
Listen, David, I haven't been laughing at you, but you're trying to put the burden of proof on me.
No!
You're claiming the insanity and the need to prove this on you.
Hold on a second.
It's not on me.
I've produced a stream of books, one of which was 1,000 pages.
But it's
I
not
talked
on me
for 10 hours.
Your claims.
What? You think in a 15-minute interview we can get into the deep detail of the background to this? Don't be silly.
No, I wouldn't think so. But I would like to ask you a few questions here. I mean, I have here pictures of. This is our former Prime Minister Sigmundur Davíð Gunnlaugsson.
Don't be silly.
Bjarni Ben.
Don't be silly. I don't know these people. Why would I know?
But could you see if they're reptiles?
Don't be silly. There's one person here who's a mature adult. Actually, two. Jamie's over there.
Well, I mean,
can you see classic mainstream media presenters? Absolute
Can you see reptilians?
Don't
when
be
you look
silly.
at
You're talking to an adult.
What do you mean?
Don't talk like a child. Why don't you show me a picture? Is this a reptile? Don't be silly.
But what do you think?
Why don't you start thinking about the fact that this country's economy is in a desperate state, eh?
Yeah.
Eh?
The financial minister, Benedict Johansson, he's a reptile, right?
You see what you're dealing with, Jay, when you get into this stuff. This is what you're dealing with, man.
David, come on. I mean, I'm just trying to have a conversation about your theories.
No, you're not.
Yes, you're saying that people in government are reptilians.
You're showing me pictures. Is that a reptile? Don't be silly.
Honestly, this is
how
your theory.
Old are you?
This is your theory. People in charge.
And people who want to know the
government.
background will come on Sunday and see it in detail. They'll read the books where they see it in fine detail.
And according to you, the Isle of Wight is a world within a world with Freemasonry and Satanism at its center.
So is every other society.
Really?
Yeah.
Satanism and Freemasonry?
Yeah, you haven't got a clue, mate, have you?
No.
You're like a babe in arms. And the fact that people like this are between what's going on in the world and what people are told is going on is terrifying. And you know something? That's the very reason why what I'm exposing can do what it does, because the mainstream media is just the PR department for the mainstream version of everything.
You talk of satanic sacrifices.
Yeah.
And people are.
It's too much for your mind to cope with.
No, it's not too much for my mind. It's just it's like a good B horror flick.
Yeah.
I've seen a few of those.
Yeah.
That doesn't upset me. But I mean, you really believe this? Is this actually what you believe, that you have Freemasons, Satanists that are sacrificing people in the woods, in the forest, on the Isle of Wight?
If you'd have looked into the eyes, not just on the Isle of Wight, all over the world.
Okay.
I'm going to get mature here. It might be too much for you. Mm-hmm. If you looked in the eyes,
it's not too much for me, David.
If you looked in the eyes of people as I have all over the world, who've experienced these sacrificial rituals, who have been abused in mind control projects in America from the age of 5 and 6. You might have a different idea and version of possibility. I'm not here, you see. I'm not here to convince you of anything.
No.
Listening to this program will be people like you, and there'll be people with a mind of their own. The people with a mind of their own will hear what I say. People like you will not.
Sure, David. Blame it all on me.
No, I'm not. You're just a classic expression of the mainstream media.
How can I be sure that you are not a reptilian and a part of the conspiracy, trying to make everything appear otherwise than it really is?
Well, you don't.
No, I don't.
Oh, you've asked a question outside the box. Well done.
Well done.
Congratulations.
Are you a reptile?
Don't be silly.
Don't be silly. Why not?
Why would I be exposing it, for goodness sake? Honestly, it's an interesting experience. Thank you very much.
No. And you're speaking here in Iceland.
I am. Hardy, innit?
When is it?
Sunday.
Sunday. In Harpa.
All day. 10 o'clock. Absolutely on the button start, because I've got 10 hours of fantastic information. 1,600, nearly 2,000 illustrations, and then the detail can be seen in the background.
Do you have information on the people who rule things here in Iceland?
No.
I mean, but you say it's not just on the Isle of Wight; it's all over the world. So you would, I guess you would say that
if it's happened,
the government in Iceland is the same of the same race and species.
Everywhere I've been, Satanism and paedophilia have been prevalent in the upper echelons.
Do you believe that the president of Iceland?
How do I know, mate? I arrived yesterday.
Now, would you assume? I mean, because you say that people in charge of government everywhere.
There's two types of people. There's people who are in positions of power as front people, who just know next to nothing, and there's others that absolutely know what's going on in the deep level that I'm talking about. But the big people are not those here today, come tomorrow politicians. They're those in the background who are always there.
But are you going to be looking into Icelandic politicians before your talk on Sunday?
Well, if I arrived on Tuesday from Slovenia, and then on Saturday stood up in front of people and said, I'm going to tell you all about Iceland, then I would be a fraud. I'm going to tell people about the global networks, like a vast spider's web, of which one strand will be Iceland, as a strand is Britain, as a strand is France, as a strand is Belgium, etc.
Okay, but tell me, in theory, a man who was like for 10 years the mayor of Reykjavik, and then for 14 years the prime minister of Iceland, and then for a few years chairman of the central bank, and now an editor of the biggest newspaper, he would definitely fit the profile for a reptilian, satanist, Freemasonry cult leader. Right?
I would take another angle on that. I would say with 320,000 people in this country, for one person to have so much power in so many areas, isn't it? Is it not? Is there not room for other people to do those things, and does one person have to do them all? Why? This is the whole point. You see. This is the whole point. You see. If you're a few, and we're talking about a few compared with the target population, you have to centralize power. And what we've seen in this world constantly now, decade after decade, we've even got a name for it, globalization. We've seen the constant centralization of power into fewer and fewer hands. The European Union is a classic. That's why Britain's just voted a majority to come out. You have a European Union now where a handful of dark suit bureaucrats are dictating to the entirety of Europe. And I was reading last night that there are some in Iceland politics that actually want to go back into the European Union or go into the European Union for the first time. That's like looking at a tower block ablaze and asking when you can move in. It's crazy.
You would believe that those politicians are part of a bigger conspiracy of reptilian people?
It's a massive strand in the web. If you've got to centralize decision making, you cannot have diversity of decision making and at the same time have centralized control. You have to centralize decision making, and then you can dictate to vast and ever greater numbers of people from that central point. That's how it's done.
Okay, David Icke, it's been interesting talking to you.
I'm glad it's been interesting for me. It's been a pleasure. It really has.
I thank you so much.
Thank you. I know what